All right, hello, we're back again. So we said that the second part of this series, we're going to take a look at what a web app is and how a web app is actually working. And we're going to use Stack Overflow as an example of what's actually going on here. But before we get that, I want to take a step back and think back to the really olden days of the internet. So back when the internet was really just confined to a couple massive computers at a few universities around the country, around the U.S. So think of, yes, we have Stack Overflow, TJ, Amazon, Google, all these companies and institutions around. Let's sort of roll our brain back to thinking of this as being like maybe there are like Stanford, Harvard, Columbia, six or seven possible sources and six or seven possible destinations in the 60s and 70s with the early internet going on over here. So a lot of the structures looked very similar. And things also look different, obviously, but things are going to look similar. So first of all, we needed addresses, right? So we needed these numeric addresses, and they, when they set the internet up, they didn't have these, 2 to the 8th times 2 to the 8th times 2 to the 8th times 2 to the 8th possible addresses. They started with 64 possible addresses. So we were dealing with like a countably infinite number of 64 devices on the internet, mainly due to the fact that one internet connected computer basically took up the entire floor of a university. So yeah, there were relatively fewer computers connected to the internet at that time. And then also another thing that was about the internet in the 60s and 70s, and even through more or less more modern times, was it was really just a file fetching service. So we have these computers at the destination on the internet, and so we can think of them as having different names, but the idea here is that there's still some server bank at some destination. And so, if we want some information off of this remote computer, basically what the internet could do was could fetch you a file from this remote location, and the file um, was sent back along the nodes via this hypertext protocol, this HTTP protocol, and we could have it formatted a particular way. So, yes, the early days we think of the internet basically as like a remote file service. You could almost think of it as like a cloud file, right? And when we had this like cloud file based internet system, that sort of grew into this thing that was Apache. We no longer use Apache, but one thing that was really common when we had this file based system was URLs, which are internet addresses that end in .html. So let's take a look at something right now, and let's go over to the internet. So I'm going to do a little swap here. We are going to go to Stack Overflow over here. Notice that when I bring up my address over here, how do I exit the Vim editor? What you don't see is this .html, if there were a .html, that sort of implies that there's a static file associated with this particular page, that we're making some request to the Stack Overflow server, and it's grabbing that static file associated with that page. And unfortunately, that just doesn't make sense with the sort of speed that we're required. If you think of Twitter, responding and being an HTML page like that couldn't be possible to have an HTML page that sort of responds and adapts and gets new information loaded into it as people are actively clicking on this. So it doesn't work that way. So what we've got now is this program, right? And so what we're going to have instead of a direct file in the same thing that looks like a file address over here. So while this looks like a file address, it's not actually a file. It's causing a program to run. And when that program runs, it's going to do basically some dynamic page generation, right? It's going to fetch a title out of a database. It's going to fetch a question out of a database. It's going to fetch upvotes out of the database and some supplemental information, the number of answers. It's going to fetch information with the answers out of the database as well. It's going to throw them. The program is going to throw all of that information into a template, kind of like a Mad Lib, and send this page back across the network. And here we go. It's going to send that page that it constructs at the time that you land at Stack Overflow. It's going to construct that page back along and then it's going to send it back to you along the network over here. So if I were to ask for a different page, I'm going to make different database fetches by triggering that program, and then I'm going to get a different page that comes back off of this. It's actually really quite straightforward. And so we're not so much generating pages like a .html page, some sort of static page. We're generating a program that can generate content that looks like a page. Okay, and our programs are going to be living on the TJ servers, and they're going to be triggered when people land at TJ. You know, they could be triggered anywhere else. We could where we're going to go next is we're going to write programs that do the exact same thing that live on this computer over here. But the program, because the program, that same program lives on the TJ's website, it's going to be accessible to anybody who goes to TJ's site and will fetch that information. And so, you know, if we go back and take a look at what these programs are doing, you can sort of see the similarity over here. So if I type in some other question over here, you know, we can begin to look at the internet as a programmatically constructed entity here, right? So this thing fetched the title out. It fetched the date, that the program fetched the date out of the database. It fetched the question out of the database. Threw all this into the templating engine, as well as the login button. And, you know, all the things, many of the things that we look at here are really going to describe what the stuff that we're doing in this course is over there. We are going to be implementing logins. We are going to be implementing page-based scripts that trigger upvotes and downvotes, that have that go back and update the database, so that if someone else were to reload this page, they could get information that came out of that database. And we're going to be building templating engines. We're going to be dealing with formatting, and it's going to be a fun adventure. So on the third video, what we're going to do is we are going to begin constructing a very basic web server. So here we go.